Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Poet Speaks podcast. Our next guest is a Thai interdisciplinary visual artist and poet based in California. Her works explore feminist themes through a surreal aesthetic that highlights the morbid and the mundane. Born and raised in Thailand, she is inspired by the complicated relationship she has with her home country. Her work employs punchy and subversive visual language to convey an expressive and a rebellious inquiry into the everyday. Everyone, please welcome to the podcast, Blue. Blue, how are you?
Good. Thank you for having me. I think hearing you say all that makes me feel so official. I feel like a real artist. Thank you.
Well, you are a real artist. What you mean? You feel like one. You are a real artist. So tell us a
Thank
little
you.
bit, introduce to us where are you currently located at right now in the world? Are you out there in California? And what part in California if you are?
I'm currently in the UK actually. So I'm living in London at the moment. Yeah. So that's where I'm physically located. Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. So tell us, you born and raised in Cali though, or were you born and raised in Thailand?
No, I'm born and raised in Thailand. It's funny because I'm living in London for like maybe 3 months now, and gonna be living here for like a month more. But when I meet like Londoners, they are like, "Oh, where are you from?" And it's like not popular to say that like you're from American, you're American. So I'm like, I'm from Thailand, but like which I am. And then they narrowed their eyes like, "But where is your accent from?" And I'm like, "Oh, I guess California." But yeah, so like I did grow up in Thailand from like age like until I was 18, and then I moved to school. Like I got a scholarship to a university that is based in California, but I was just living there for like a year. And then, so our university is a bit weird where we go to a different country every semester. It's like a global rotation program. And then, like, in the last year of university, which is like, I think around 6 months ago, I kind of moved back to California to stay with my best friend on her grandmother's avocado farm while I figured my life out. Yeah, so that's sort of where the Cali part comes in. But I think like I don't know why I feel somewhat painfully California in a sense. But yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. That's pretty amazing. Tell me what university did you end up going to? I went to UC Davis. I don't know if you're familiar with the UC system in Cali. I went to UC Davis. What
Mhm.
school did you go to that had you globetrotting everywhere?
Uh, it's called Minerva. Here's the
Okay.
thing, it sounds cool in theory, but a lot of us felt scammed.
Oh,
But yeah, I don't know. I'm their third generation. It's a new school. Um, like I'm just gonna say that I don't know, I don't want to badmouth it too much too, but because I know that a lot of the alumni are very protective of the brand, but like I have a younger brother. When he was like choosing schools, and he was like thinking about going applying to mine, and I was like, yeah, make that your backup. That
wow.
might not be, yeah, but I mean it did make me who I am today though, like the whole globetrotting thing, and like moving around a lot. It's a mixed bag of experience.
For sure, for
Yeah.
sure. So tell us a little
Mhm.
bit about going back a little. You were born and raised in Thailand. How are you
Mhm.
inspired by that through your writing and like you have kind of a description on your website, complicated
Yeah.
relationship you have with your homeland. Describe a little bit of that for us.
Mhm. I use complicated because I didn't want to outright say traumatic, but I think so. I grew up in Thailand all my life, and I think it's more like I'm not even sure where to begin, right? It's like asking a fish, it's like that question about like asking a fish about the water it's swimming in a sense, and that water is so much part of the fish. But I think it's just like because I've always felt, I think everyone, so something I think a lot of Thai people my age have in common is this fervent desire to be out of our country, to and this feeling of like deep sense of oppression that is just very common. And I think it stems from like our history with Thailand, swinging from like being we're supposed to be a democratic country, but there's always like military coups happening. There's that long shadow of the monarchy, and I think like and it kind of trickles down, right, in terms of like people personal rights and personal expressions. And I think like it affects sort of young people, like everyone, like their sense of selves. I think my generation especially are more, I think, aware about how and very vocal. And I think it's obviously like lucky because we have generations of protesters before us, but I think because we have the internet as well, I think, and like the type of media that we consume, and like, you know, the internet, and it's just like easier for, I think, ideas to spread. Whereas I think like my mom's generation, my grandparents' generation, that awareness of like our personal rights and how it's actually being breached is not as well spoken of. And I think like how that manifests in the everyday are things like I don't know, like small things like the way teachers treat you at school. Like I think it's very, like, for example, I grew up in I went to a Thai school, and like I got bullied in school a lot, like by students, but most painfully was by like teachers. And what they do is like they would shame me in class, and that would be a normal thing. Or one posted on Facebook about me, and that would be a normal thing. Which is like should be unacceptable. But and then like it's small things like school rules, right, which is, I think it's like everywhere, but like that breach of the body in a way. I hope I'm making sense, but I think what I'm trying to illustrate is just that yeah, like that lack of like personal respects of like people being different from the collective. I know that friends who are, for example, like LGBTQ, they feel very, in a sense, like unaccepted. Or yeah, like just like any sort of like, if you're vocal on an unconventional path, I think it's very easy to feel isolated and rejected. And I think that's what I feel about my motherland. And I think it's because of this like political baggage of how we view our personal rights. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
No, for sure. Absolutely. I could completely see where you're coming from with the complicated relationship that you have, because, you know, you have kind of that personal right issue that you're facing, but in the same breath, that is like your motherland, right? That's your home. Either way, you can't separate yourself from your home, no matter how traumatic, you know, maybe a situation was. So it becomes difficult trying to balance those two opposite ends of the spectrum out. So I completely understand where you're coming from with that. So for you, how was that manifested now in the writing, specifically in the poetry? Obviously you're a multi-medium artist. How was that really manifested in your writing, this kind of trauma / complicated relationship? How's that really manifested itself in your poetry?
Yeah, I think for me, I think a lot of my works are really rooted in feminist themes. And for me, it's sort of, I think feminism is sort of like a voice or a tool or framework that I think I discovered in university. And it started with like a personal deprogramming in a way, because I think I grew up feeling so different, but then at the same time, feeling appalled by the system, but didn't have words to call it out. And I think with when and because I was a liberal art student, I studied like art and humanities, and when we started learning about feminist theories, it was incredibly liberating to have finally like keywords to name the things that I was going through, and to have like frameworks in unpacking and understanding oppression in a sense. And so I think that led into my work in a way. I think also, so I've been painting all my life, writing all my life, but I think I've always trying to figure out like, what does it mean to be an artist, right? Like, what does my work mean? And I think in the process of like, so my course was very art theory heavy. And I think it started me trying to see like what and so we would read a lot about these different artists, analyze their works, and I think what I tend to gravitate towards are those who bring out like the personal, being the showing how the personal is political, which is like a very, you know, like feminist thing. And then it sort of like allow me sort of like a framework in sort of how I create my own works, and like by first like looking inwards and like seeing where are the tensions within myself that I feel like I need to express or call out, and like vocalize. And I think and then I think it started from there, poetry, because of the nature of poetry. So I was living in Berlin for about 4 months, and it was the poetry scene there that really truly I think or not shape but like sparked the way I use my voice in art, because like in the poetry scene, in the slam poetry scene there, was very political, it was very liberal. And like seeing how these artists, you know, step up on the stage and like vocalize certain topics, it kind of clicked in me that like, oh, this is how you use your voice in terms of protest art. Like that's the beautiful thing about especially open mic and slam poetry, because there is this thing where anybody could come up on stage and there's suddenly this dynamic between the mass onlooker and the person, right? And they might have like a specific type of experience, and they actually get to negotiate the gaze. I think a lot of my works thinks a lot about how we negotiate the gaze, and sort of like to actually say, this is who I am, this is my pain, this is how I see it, and this is how I need you to see it, if that makes sense. And I think that's like such a powerful thing, because obviously I think there is the mainstream gaze on many things that is like influenced by patriarchal views, that has been that carries the baggage of oppression in multiple ways. And then like I think we rely a lot on artists to actually, you know, to create that gaze shift. And so I think that's how I see myself doing, and mostly so. And for me to make it the most authentic and genuine, I start with where I feel it in my body, where I feel it in my heart, with my experiences, and then I express it from there. And I think I started branching out in a lot of other mediums, because I've always been doing poetry, and I felt somewhat comfortable, confident about it, but not so much with visual arts. I think I had a hard time feeling like a real artist in that sense. But I met with this architect friend, and he was like, "I love the way your mind works," and he was getting together a team to work on an exhibition, like an installation art exhibition in Bangkok, and so he let me in, and there were these like other really cool young visual artists that were fashion design students, graphic design students, and I was like this random person who studied art theory, and like writing poetry and paint sometimes. But then, you know, I was immediately accepted, and I think like he helped me realize concepts and ideas in different forms, and that made me realize that like, oh yeah. And I think something cool that he said was that for him the story should dictate the medium. And I think that was so freeing to recognize, and like looking inward and realizing that like, oh, there are certain pieces of stories inside of me that poetry works amazingly, but then I could use comedy, I could try film, I could try photography, and that's just been liberating from there. Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. I love that. It seems like you're very steeped in the kind of the openness of how far you can take your art. You said something very powerful there. I thought you feel like it's an artist's job to negotiate gaze. Explain a little bit, what do you mean by that truly, and how do you feel like you negotiate gaze with what you focus on through your work? to negotiate the gaze. What do you mean by that? And how do you feel like you negotiate the gaze through your work?
Yeah, I think there's this book that for not book, but like reading that we were made to read in school. And I think it forever changed the way I look at art, and I think like define the way and help guide me still to this day. It's called, I think, The Art of Looking, or the Ways of Seeing. I'm not sure, but it talks mainly about the gaze, right? Because like really that is what art is about. Art is about how we perceive, how we look at things. And I think a lot of the times people take that for granted, that the way we look and the way we see it and the way we think and our opinions are actually this distillation of so many factors of like socioeconomic factors, this like baggage of history. And I think there is and it's almost, I think, like sometimes fun and almost a responsible thing sometimes to unpack that, right? And I think that's where the artist's job comes in sort of like really unpacking how are we seeing things, and like if there are points of friction where maybe I feel different, and maybe this gaze that we have is actually hurting me or hurting people I know. Like for example, like I think like feminism, we are always constantly talking about this gaze, right? Like the gaze that the patriarchy has given to us. And I think I'm not just talking about the male gaze either, right? But it's also like about how we perceive women should be in the workplace, how we perceive mothers, and what motherhood should look like, for example, how or even in the LGBTQ movement, there is this like surging different perspective now of the idea that gender is fluid, which is like different from like say our parents' generation, right? And like that is something about that is negotiating the gaze of like rethinking and like making it less hurtful, because like the gaze that we carry shouldn't be taken for granted. It does comes from somewhere, and I think it needs a constant revisiting, questioning, unpacking, unlearning, and rebuilding. And so I think that's like something I feel like gravitate towards, and I think that's something a lot of artists does intentionally or unknowingly, because it's contributing to any sort of narrative, right? The works that you do. And I think how I negotiate the gaze, it's different in sort of the mediums that I do, but a lot of the time it goes back to like the very feminist themes in my work. But for example, if it's in my poetry, I think lately I think I've been writing a lot of poetry about my sex life. For example, like there's one called Slut, or one that is called An Ode to Pegging. And I think, like, for example, An Ode to Pegging was talking about how so obviously I grew up in Thailand, and I think like people look at Thailand as this, like, because of like the sex tourism and the way Thailand markets itself, right? But it's almost incredibly hypocritical, because like our society and our religion isn't like that. Our culture isn't exactly like that. We do slut shame so much. Like we shame anyone who's like outside the normal gender binary, right? And I think for me, I think I grew up knowing that like, for example, I'm bi, I'm very hyper feminine, but I think I knew that I sometimes can be attracted to men who are also more feminine, if that makes sense. And I think like when I came to the States, and so there was this boy. I think I started becoming more confident in my sexuality, understanding more things about like kink play and things like that. I think pegging has always like intrigued me. And I was with this guy who's bi, and he was used to pegging, and that was something he was into too. But then I think, and then that one night when we did it, he asked me, like me wearing my strap on, that, do you feel powerful? You have this like big purple dick between your legs. And I told him like, no, like it almost felt wrong or like anti-feminist to call this like penis powerful. So I think I wrote that poem sort of about that, and like about how being able to like bring out the feminine in him and challenge that, I think, sexual dynamic of what love means in sex, I think, through sort of wearing a strap on. And so I think like that's what, if that makes any sense, I think that's what challenging the gaze is for me, and how that and that's how I do it in my works. I think I take like personal experiences and sort of like see where the conflicts are within the mainstream gaze, and then expand it, talk about it, make it beautiful. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a very fascinating look at so many of those kind of I always say, like, I feel like a lot of a lot of the way in which our society describes sex is very much a constant contradiction. So it's this kind of weird thing. It's different. It's no matter what culture you go to, I feel like you constantly see the contradictory statements regarding sex, sexuality, love making, whatever it may be, right? So I think that's very fascinating how you're kind of dippulating between the two. There's a it's interesting because you mentioned like the strap-on story. This
Mhm.
is, there's a famous porn star called Skin Diamond. I remember she did an interview where she was describing putting a strap on, and the way she described it, she's like,
Mhm.
I felt a very powerful feeling when I had a strap on. Like I felt so
Mhm.
powerful when I had a plastic dick on me. And it was a fascinating thing. So hearing you say that, it is kind of this weird kind of like strapulation where I think we do, no pun intended, this weird kind of thing that we do in our mind where because of we give so much power, I think, in our world to the masculinity, we don't, or
Yes.
what is perceived as masculinity, that we just think a penis equals power, or like
Yeah.
male orgasm equals power. But it's a very like it's this really weird dance that we do, that it's kind of bizarre almost if you think about it, if you just look at the
Mhm.
intricacies of how sex works, what sex looks like for different people. So I just,
Exactly.
yeah, I thought that went through my mind as you were telling that story, and thank you for sharing that with us. That was a
Of course. I
very
I love looking like the way I do and being able to tell that story because I think it surprises people. I'm like, oh, this is a cute little Asian girl who looks very timid, and then like she talks about putting on a purple strap on. I think I just love that. I like love surprising people with that story. It's really fun.
honestly, I've heard it all, girl. You did not take me
Mhm.
back. No
Yeah.
worries.
Oh
But
man.
no, I
Oh man, nothing
appreciate
surprises Amanda.
that at
It's too
this point
bad.
in life. No,
Yeah.
no.
Of course, of course. You're too cool for that. You're too cool for that. I love especially telling it to white men, like
Oh yeah,
tall
yeah.
macho white men, and then I could see it in their eyes, their assholes going like bloop, like they're
Ah.
feeling terrified. I love that so much.
Oh
Yeah.
man, oh man. So you know what? Taking it forward, your art is a very just it's a whole, I think, really describes an accumulation of you, which is so many dimensions, so many different things. There's a quote that I
Mhm.
love that someone said on this podcast at one point: being an artist is literally noticing the details in life. And I feel like your
Mhm.
work really accumulates in that because you really take notice of just the details. And that's how we see it through writing, visual, all the things that you're doing. So I want to move forward and talk about, you have a platform called the F Word. You also do film work, photography, and art. What are you doing with that platform to uplift different messages? Your platform is called the F Word. Please tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was so my team and I aren't currently working on it now, sadly, but it was this feminist art magazine that I started last year in the beginning of January. And I think, um, yeah, it was this volunteer base. I was able to like recruit these like very passionate 4 or 5 other women to like make it happen. And while it was, so we were only able to run for 6 months, but I think like because of the pandemic and everything, we got burned out a bit too quick. And I think like because it was volunteer based and all of us had like our day jobs and everything, we kind of realized that like it's not really sustainable to run it. And sadly we needed to close it down, but I know that like we still have such a huge love and tenderness for that platform. But it was called the F word because like we wanted it to be about feminism, but playing with that idea of feminism being like a sort of like an F word, like a word that people feel like you shouldn't say almost. But yeah, and what we did was, I think it was just supposed to be a platform for different experiences of the women, including expats community living in Bangkok mostly at the moment. Because I think I think Thailand is having this political shift at the moment, and that also means that a lot of feminist movements are taking momentum. And I think and a lot of the times there are already so many, like for example, Instagram accounts or based in Thailand that are doing sort of like this unlearning that I told you about, of like sort of talking about what this body shaming means and educating the masses about feminism. But I think I wanted to create one where there is a sense of community between women. And also I think people who just feel alienated by the patriarchy. Yeah, I just wanted to create this like community and this sharing of experiences, because I think a big part of what drives me as a person is about bringing people together, uplifting others' voices, because I think that's the best way we can, in a way, like smash the patriarchy. Because like it's more like you want as many voices illustrating what their reality is as much as possible, right? Like that, I think that's a beautiful thing of like what democratic rights truly means, of like allowing even sort of like the most unconventional sort of oppressed minority to be able to stand up and say, this is my experience and you must listen and you must hear me and you must take it seriously. So I think that was like the intention that the magazine came up with. And so we did, I think, a few episodes of like interviewing women artists, feminist women artists especially. We also would showcase works of, I think there was a photojournalist who went to the south of Thailand, I think, and looked into how the pandemic affected sex workers. Yeah, and I guess like just different articles and like receiving submissions, writing creative writing submissions, and also op-eds about different topics, but just mostly trying to cover, I think, genuine personal experiences. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So do you all continue to run that platform, or is there kind of a ETA expected date to continue that going?
Oh, we kind of dropped it around, I think, June of last year. So it's been like almost a year ago. I think I also needed to like step back a lot from it, just because I think I was dealing with a lot of like mental health issues and I just couldn't take that responsibility anymore. And I think there is some sort of, I think, almost guilt and confusion when I was running the platform, is that I think because of my complicated relationship with my motherland, and like Thailand being a tourist country in a sense, where I think the government really prioritize expats, yet I feel, and because I feel most comfortable in English and not in my mother tongue, because a lot of Thainess, I think, still is traumatic to me. So I gravitate towards more English, and so the platform was in English. And I think there was like intense guilt and feeling that I was out of touch from sort of like what is actually going on and maybe what the Thai feminist scene actually needed. And I think I just felt confused and guilty, and I think I needed to step back. So it's not running anymore currently, but I know that like everyone in the team still have such like love for what we were doing. But yeah, I think we kind of just like scattered all over the globe now, and I'm not sure we'll pick it up anytime soon.
Okay, word. So very interesting. Just learning about your art, learning about how you're doing all these things. And really, it seems your art is very much just combining every aspect of your life, kind of find you back to combining all these things into who is Blue, the artist, right? So it's very fascinating hearing all these pieces kind of connect together. For you, do you realize like a lot of like what all the kind of things that you're doing, they all kind of round about to going back to like an accumulation of what you truly represent, like which is art. Do you like subconsciously realize that all your stuff kind of circles round back to each other?
Yeah, I think that's where I come from. With my art, I think how I think I can be self-critical, and so I think sometimes I go back to, all right, what does a good art means to me? I think good art to me means honest art, one that is honest, one that is absolutely genuine and absolutely vulnerable. So I think it requires a lot of, I guess, like coming from somewhere internal. And so I feel safest, I think, when I do things that are from me. So I know that this is really what I'm talking about. I think I almost have some sort of like anxiety about sort of talking about other people's experiences, because I feel like that's almost not fair. Because I think like being an Asian woman going around in a lot of spaces, I know how it feels to have my voice be overstepped. I know how it feels to like having, for example, to adapt the way that I talk, my vocabularies to an a more American way of speaking, just to be heard, right? To be recognized, to be seen. And so I think like that's why it's also important to me that I'm just really purely talking about myself. And I think myself can encompass a lot of things, because I'm sort of like, in a way, each person is an amalgamation of, like I said, like socioeconomic background, what's happening politically. Again, the personal is political. So yeah, so I think that's like just sort of what I think about when it comes to art. And I know that know that I'm making good art. And by knowing that I'm being completely vulnerable and I'm being completely honest. And I think the thing that I feel most sure about being honest about is myself, because I know I know me the most. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love, you know what, one of the best things about this show is I get to meet people that you can just tell they're very much living in their authenticity through their art. So for me, it's very inspiring to hear you say things like that. So it keeps me like, okay, I gotta keep going. Let me pick up that piece that I was doing. So I appreciate that. I really do. Very inspiring. So Blue,
Oh,
yeah, hell
yeah.
yeah. And so, Blue, we are almost wrapping up here. There's been such a great interview getting to know you, getting to know your story. So, tell me, what do you think people can truly take away from spoken word poetry?
Oh, girl, just feel, go listen. I think spoken word poetry is so much about deep listening. I think we can forget in our everyday and like sort of in our lives about what's really happening. And I think also feeling overwhelmed by the news. And I think there's almost a disconnection, right? Sort of about we see so many statistics, we see so many numbers in the news, in the media that we consume, in a sense. And but I think we're so removed from one another. And I think what's beautiful about spoken word poetry is actually you go into a room and you do this deep listening of another person's experiences, right? And like that requires you being so vulnerable too, to like see this other human being, look them in the eye, and it might be someone you don't even, you couldn't even fathom sort of like the background that they came from or the life that they're currently living. But now you can with this, like not fully, but like what they are showing you. So it allows you for this like beautiful deep listening. And I think it's such a beautiful space for connection, awakening. So yeah, go to open mics, go deep listen, go open your heart, even if it's sometimes it's cringy. It's amazing especially when it's cringy,
Yeah.
it's just humans connecting. I think that's a lovely thing. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Beautiful answer. So for our last question, Blue, why do you need to get your words out?
Oh, healing. I've been so traumatized by my country, man. So I think like it's just I think I think it's the same way why people get tattoos or why people dress a certain way. It's again back to negotiating the gaze, right? It's like, yes, I'm born with this baggage in this body and these experiences, but I want you to look at me in a way that really see me, that I don't feel invisible. And so I think that's why I constantly feel the need to vocalize, to be on stage, to say, to show that like I exist and this is how I am existing. And I think I'm beautiful despite whatever anything that has been said to me, whatever the world has been said to me. I am affirming to myself that I exist and I'm powerful and I'm precious. Yeah. So I think that's what keeps me wanting to vocalize.
Perfect. That's why Blue needs to get her words out. Perfect. Perfect way to end with a beautiful, beautiful answer. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Blue. This was such a great time, great conversation that we were able to have. So please tell us before we wrap up, what is 2022 and beyond looking like for you, as well as tell us where we can find all your socials, your links to all of your amazing work, your poetry, your filmography, all that good stuff.
Sure. So I have an Instagram account called This Blue Creature. And there's a link to my website in my bio. And my website is called worldwideweb.blueretrocredit.com. And that's where you can consume my art at the moment. And I mean, if you're in London, hit me up. I need friends. Yeah. Sorry, did I forget a part of your question?
What's the rest of the year looking like for your artwork?
Oh,
Some projects.
girl, I'm trying to the unsexy answer to that is I'm trying to get a job. So like I'm trying to get a job in UX design. I tell people that I'm trying to sell my soul to Mark Zuckerberg. Because like trying to be an artist is hard, I think, in terms of money wise. And I think I realized I don't want to put sort of monetary pressure on something I love. So at the moment I'm studying studying like creating a portfolio for user experience design because tech is where the money is. And yeah, so but I think like I'm hoping to like dive more into photography. I think eventually when I have the chance to do more performance art, but I'm really hoping to create more film pieces that incorporate my poetry and do more photography and obviously keep writing and keep performing. So yeah.
1000%. All right. Well, Blue, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun.
Absolutely. So everyone, check out all of Blue's amazing work. It'll be on our YouTube page. Please check out the YouTube page of the Poet Speaks podcast. We'll have all of her links. Go support her. Go support all of her amazing work she's doing. All right, everyone. This is the Poet Speaks podcast, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.